Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for spending time with me this morning. I am so excited to dig into this topic of the power of you and really honestly give you practical tips and some concrete things that you can do starting even today to help you have the greatest positive impact, not only in your job and in your career, but in your life as well. Help you stand out as your best self, help you thrive, which is more important now than maybe it's ever been, and really help you find more meaning in your role. Whatever your job might be, whatever your career path might be, by connecting who you are to what you do. And so, as we dive in this morning, I want to just pause and really encourage you to take this time, this next 40, 45 minutes I'll be sharing, then we'll have about 10, 15 minutes of Q&A. But I really want to encourage you to take this time as time for you. I know how it is to be dialing into virtual conferences and juggling with different things and maybe having your email up and your phone beeping at you and all the different things like that. And so I really, really encourage you, if you can, shut everything down. Maybe you can have a place to take notes, either a journal or a piece of paper or on your computer, that's fine too. But I really, really want you to be able to lean into this time and take time for you, because if you think about it, there's so many challenges right now. In our world, you don't need me to tell you that. And I'm sure each and every one of you in this session has your own challenges that you're facing in your job, in your career, maybe in your personal life as well. And whatever kind of transformation and impact, whatever kind of ripple effect we want to have, really starts with each one of us individually. So I encourage you to just take time for you, really lean in and think about some of the questions, some of the bigger questions like, who am I? What do I want to be doing with my life and my career? What kind of impact do I want to have? So before we dive in, I'm just going to share a little bit about myself. I always like to know, who I'm hearing from you, who I'm hearing from. I do a lot of work with women. I've had my own coaching practice for the last 5 years, Her Team Success. I've worked with companies and women in this area of personal branding and professional and personal development for years. I'm currently on the team at the woman-owned marketing agency Stoltz in Boise, an amazing team of people, and have a background in marketing and branding and communications. I'm going to be giving you some concrete tips on some things that you can do to communicate with more strength and more confidence, as well as we get a little bit later into this session together today. But on a personal note, because I always like to just share a little personal stuff too. This is my family, introduce you to my family. This is my daughter, Katie. She's 22. They grow up so fast. I'm sure those of you who have maybe teens or young adult kids or adult kids, you know what I'm talking about when I say that. And that is my husband, Mike. He works at HP. So I'm sure some of you are dialing in from Hewlett Packard. I used to work at HP as well. That's our son, Luke. And it's a strange thing when your baby towers over you. He's in college in Arizona. So that is my family. And of course, I have to mention our newest family member, although he's not so new anymore, he's a year and a half, but that is our dog, our golden doodle, Winston. He was our little COVID puppy. Did anybody else in this session get a COVID puppy or a dog during COVID? If so, you can put it in the chat. I'll know I'm not alone, but I talked to so many people. Yep, I got 2 COVID puppies. Lots of thumbs up. Oh, a cat. I love cats too. Cats are great. A golden retriever. Do plants count? Sure, Katie, plants count. Anyway, okay, so that's just a little bit about me, so you know who you're hearing from today. Okay, we're going to start off with an exercise. So if you do have something to write on, or you can make this note on your computer as well, and get your phone out for a calculator, and then promise me you're going to put it back away after we do this. But I want to start off with this exercise because it kind of just sets the stage for what we're going to be digging into today. So take age, whatever your age is, and multiply your age times 365. So what we're doing here is we're getting your current age in days. So I'm just going to pause maybe 5-10 seconds, not long, and let everybody do that. So take your age, multiply that by 365, and then write that number down. We'll just do a quick pause here. Okay, so take that number. Okay, you're going to subtract that number from this number. So take 26,645, which is the average lifespan in days, and you're going to subtract the number that you already came up with. And what we're doing here is theoretically, if we if we live an average lifespan, this is theoretically the number of days that you may have left. And the reason I like to do it's called the days left exercise, but the reason that I like to do this exercise is because, it kind of sets the stage. If we're looking at our life in a timeline, or if you're looking at a map and there's that little red pin, it's like you are here. This gives us an idea of, okay, where are we at in our life? And of course, none of us know for sure, but it just gives us that visual, even of, okay, theoretically, I could have this many days left. So the question is, what do you want to do with those days, right? How can you have the greatest positive impact, not only in your career, but also in your life? And that's why I'm really excited to be digging into what we're going to be digging into today, because it helps to answer some of those bigger questions. So when we are talking about the power of you, what we're really talking about is your unique brand. And there are a lot of misconceptions about branding out there and your personal brand. So I want to start with that, because this is kind of a fresh perspective that I'm going to be giving you today on the whole idea of personal branding. So let's dig into some of those misconceptions first, just to set the stage. So when we're talking about personal branding, a lot of times people think it's just social media, or it's just people who want to build a name for themselves or build a reputation for themselves, or it's all about puffing yourself up, which makes so many of us uncomfortable, or it's all about promoting yourself. But that is not what we're talking about today. That is not what personal branding and strengthening your personal brand is all about. So personal branding and some of the steps we're going to be going through today is really for everyone. And it's really about you and how others see and experience you. It's also what you're known for and the unique value that you bring individually, authentically, to everything that you do. And so I like to look at it, kind of taking like a 10,000-foot step back. I've done a lot of work with branding and company branding, and I want to say, okay, let's first look at company brands. Here are two obviously very famous large companies. But if you think of Disney, what comes to mind when you think of Disney? And maybe just start putting some things in the chat if you could. When you think of Disney, obviously you're thinking more than just logo or tagline, right? So what do you think of when you think of Disney? Okay, I see magic. I see family, happiest place on earth, feel good, happy. Yeah, nostalgia, happy. Okay, right. So what about, let's switch to Amazon now. When you think of Amazon, what comes to mind when you're thinking of Amazon as a company, as a service? Convenient, fast delivery, efficient, brown box doorstep, efficient, quick delivery, fast, convenient. Yes, easy, big business. Oh, big business. I remember the old family movies. Okay, so that's probably Disney. So thank you so much for participating and chiming in. But but you can see from even those comments, when we think of a company, we're not just thinking, oh, what's their tagline, what's their logo, what's the copy on their website or anything like that. It's more, okay, how do I feel about that company? How do I personally see and experience that company? What kind of value does that company and its products and services add in my life? And it's the same is true for you and your personal brand. How do others see and experience you? What kind of value do you add in the lives of others? And so the good news is today, we're not going to be like, how do you build your brand from the ground up? Or how do you create a personal brand to harness the power of you? You already have a personal brand. So each and every one of you in this session, dialing in, you already have a personal brand. And I love this quote. So Judy Holler, she's a branding guru in the hospitality industry. I love how she says, the bottom line is this: if you're breathing, you have a personal brand, like it or not. The minute you interact with someone, your boss, your client, your prospect, the car rental guy, whoever, you are being branded. And your personal brand is the promise you make when someone hires, works with you, or has any sort of interaction with you. Any sort of interaction. So today we're going to be really digging into unearthing and exploring, well, what is your personal brand? If you already have one, how do you maximize it? How do you strengthen it? And how do you clarify it? Because that's a big piece of it too. So before we get into some steps that you can take to do all of that, I want to talk about, why does this matter? Why is this so important? Um, if you think about our world, my goodness, especially today, there's so much noise happening in the world. So just start putting in the chat, if you could, Um, what's some of the noise? Think about your day and every day that you have things coming across your desk. What kind of noise, interruptions, what is the noise that you're seeing day to day in your life? I'd love to have you chiming in and sharing, whether that's email, whether that's, oh, puppies. Yes, absolutely. Kids, phone calls, family, bulk emails, absolutely. Instant messages, emails, social media, Facebook notifications. Yes, absolutely. So all of that, news, everything. So in our world, we have so much noise coming at us every day. In the middle of all that noise, people are making decisions about you all the time. And a strong personal brand helps people to notice you, helps people to listen to you, and it helps people to trust you. So if you think about the decisions people are making about you all the time, think about, what are those decisions? It could be to hire you, to promote you, to include you in on a meeting, to trust you, to listen to you on a personal level, to want to go to lunch with you, all of these different things. So people are making decisions about you all the time. But I think even more importantly, when we are talking about this power of you and really strengthening your personal brand, this is what I have seen happen time and time again with the women that I have worked with over the years is that when you go through some of the steps that we're going to be talking about today, it also contributes to more fulfillment, more meaning, and more impact. And I have joy across the board in your life. Because when you take time to really think about, who you are and how you can have the greatest positive impact, that's when it contributes just organically as part of the process to these different things. So people with a strong personal brand, they know who they are, they know how they can contribute, and they're stepping in and they're contributing. And so it's really, and this is kind of the best part about this work that I love so much and why I get so passionate and fired up about it is it starts with you, but it's not about you. It's about the impact that you can have in the lives of others and in the world. And that's both professionally and personally. So with that, let's talk about you and your personal brand. And I like to compare it to a tree. So if you think about a tree has things that you can see, obviously, right? The tree, the branches, the leaves, the trunk. And then there are things about the tree that you can't see. So that's the roots, but that's the foundation that holds everything else up, right? And then trees change over seasons and they're constantly growing. So all of that is true for you and your personal brand. So if you think about it, there are things about you that others see. So it's how you show up, how you work, maybe even how you communicate, how you present, how you interact. But then there are all those things about you that others don't see, like the all the things in your head, the experiences that you've had in your life, your values, your passions, and all of those things. And those really hold, those are foundational, those hold everything else up. And then similar to a tree, we're all as people changing over seasons and we're all growing. So this process of, we're talking about the harnessing the power of you and really getting clear on and strengthening your personal brand. It's not a once and done, right? This is something that it's a continual process. We're always changing and we're always growing. And similar to no two trees, literally no two trees being alike, um, no two individuals are alike. And that's another thing I get so excited about helping women to strengthen their personal brand is because we're not talking about comparing, we're not talking about competing, we're not talking about imitating. We're really talking about leaning into who you authentically are and really extracting that and drawing that out and then applying that to have an impact and to take action. I love this quote by Sally Hogstead. She's another branding guru, and she says, "The heart of differentiation is that it's tough to be better, but far easier to be different." And that's so freeing because we could show up authentically as who we are, which has already been talked about in some of the awesome talks this morning in the conference. And so I'll be giving you some steps to help you be able to do that. So, how do you then strengthen, maximize, clarify your individual personal brand? And I want to give you three steps that you can take. These are the steps that I've used in my coaching practice over the years and have seen them to be extremely successful in helping women to really get clear on who they are and what they want to do and where they want to go. And so the first step, and I'm going to be diving into each of these steps in our time together and giving you takeaways and things that you can do, like I said, starting today even. But the first is discover more about who you are. So we're going to dive into that. That's actually where we're going to spend a good chunk of our time because, like I said, that is foundational. That is something that I think sometimes we tend to skip over. We tend to go straight to what should my goals be? What should my vision be? What path should I take versus who am I? And when we take the pause to really get clear on who am I and what is the unique value that I bring to the table, that informs so much of the other steps. So that's really key. So we're going to spend a good amount of time there. Two is tell who you are. And that's basically all the different ways that you communicate your brand, that you communicate who you are. So we're going to dig into that. And I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks that will hopefully help you communicate from a position of more confidence and more strength. And then give who you are. And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you take everything that we're going to be talking about and really apply it and use that to add value in the lives of others. So let's dive into step number one. And this is, like I said, it starts with the roots. This is the foundational piece. Sometimes I will have women who will come to me in my coaching work and say, Genny, um, I have to decide between these two careers and I'm just not sure what path to take. So I just want help figuring out which path to take, or I need to get clear on my vision. I know I'm not happy in what I'm doing. I'm not fulfilled. So I just need to figure out like, what's my goal and what do I want to be doing? But we always take a step back and spend time here in this step because this is where so many of those answers are uncovered. And like I said, this is the step that informs so many of those other things. So, in this step of discovering more about who you are, and I'm sure many of you on this call have done some, maybe all of these exercises in the past. These are the steps that I use in my coaching practice. There are obviously more ways out there to get really clear on who you are as a person, but these are just the steps that I use. And have found them to be effective, so I want to share them with you today. We're not going to go into all of these in detail. We're actually just going to pick two, but a high level overview of this is the first is your values. And that's one of the ones we're going to dig into more because that is so core. And I think sometimes we say, oh yeah, I know what my values are, or I have values. But what I find is a lot of times, and this was true for me in the past as well, we don't go through the actual exercise of really figuring out and naming what are our values? What are the core values that are driving my life? So we're going to dig into that a little bit more. Strengths, I know many of you have probably done Gallup strengths assessments or other strengths assessments, but that's also key, really understanding um, what am I innately good at? What are my natural talents? And being able to name those and apply those. And then passions. Those are the things that just, what makes time fly? What fires you up in your personal life? What fires you up in your professional life? What are the things you love doing? You think about ahead of time, you ruminate about after. So knowing your passions is important as well. Experiences. This is an area we're going to dig into, and I'm going to give you some practical things that you can do because I think a lot of times in life, we just go through our experiences and we don't stop to say, wait a minute, how did that shape me? How did that change me? How did that uniquely equip me or prepare me for what I could be doing or what I might want to do? So we're going to dig into that one. And then skills, all of the stuff on your resume, all of the, whether it's certifications, degrees, languages, all the things that you bring to the table. And being able to know like, well, what are my skills? What would differentiate my resume in a pile of resumes from other people? So here are all the things, and I know that's an earful, so we're going to actually just take two of these and dig into them in more detail so you can have some concrete steps to be able to discover more about yourself and strengthen your personal brand. So let's talk about values, and I'm going to talk about these pictures in just a minute. But when you think about values, I really encourage you, again, put the lens on yourself right now. Think about yourself and think about your life. Think about your priorities. Think about the things that you hold dear to your heart, like the non-negotiables in your life, the things that really drive your behavior. They define your character, they define your priorities. And these are your core values. And it's so important to know your core values because they really dictate how you feel, how you behave, how you react in different situations. When you are living out of alignment with your core values, even if you don't maybe exactly know what those core values are, if you haven't gone through the exercise of really figuring that out, but when you're living out of alignment with those core values, that is when you typically feel that greatest amount of tension and stress in your life. So, these pictures on the slide represent three of my top core values. So, the first there with the hands, people holding hands, is connection. So, for me, connection is just a core value of mine where if I have a group of friends and it feels shallow and I don't feel connected, I feel like a sense of tension around that. If I'm not connected with my family, maybe we're all in the same room and everyone's on their phones or whatever, that I have a sense of tension around that. And so for me, even connecting with audiences and shifting from in person speaking, which I used to do a lot of, to now a lot of virtual, there was definitely this shift for me in on how can I really connect with my audiences because that's such a core value and I feel a sense of tension when that's not happening. So that's connection. So another one with the books is learning. So I'm always wanting to learn and grow. And when I'm in an environment where I feel like I'm stagnant, I can sense that tension and stress around that. And then the last is that's a salad, healthy food, exercise. Again, if I'm living out of alignment with that, I feel the tension and stress in my life. And I share mine just to get you thinking about, what areas of your life when you're in alignment with your values, things are going to groove. You have the energy. You feel like you're thriving, right? And when you're not, you can sense that tension and that stress. So, how do you get clear on your values so that you can be in a place of well being where you are thriving and you're not feeling that tension and that stress? So, I want to share this resource with you. Some of you may be very familiar with this already. It's from Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. And I have two bullet points on there, so you can just take this as an action. You can do a screenshot of this slide if you want. But even if you just Google Brene Brown, values download, this will come up and you can download it for free. Or you can go to daretoleadbrenebrown.com and get this as well as one of her free resources. But this is a really valuable tool because, and this is just showing a snapshot of the very top, but this takes up like the whole page. And what she did was she has a whole chapter on how to identify your values. And she actually encourages you to narrow it down to your top two, which is a really hard exercise to do, but it's worth going through. And so the list of values is just to get you thinking like, well, what resonates with me? So an action for you, if you haven't done a values exercise, or actually it might be a good time, especially with everything that's been happening in the world and the pandemic, to just kind of do a reset and kind of check in on your values, is download this. And then I recommend just reading through it and circle the ones that resonate with you, the ones that kind of jump off, like whether that's freedom or authenticity or connection or trust or whatever it might be. And then narrow those down. So keep narrowing it down until you get to like your top five if you can. And like she says, top two. Um, but and one of the recommendations I have on narrowing it down is, for me, how I got to connection as one of my top values was I first listed a bunch of things like I'm like, okay, yeah, family, that's so important, friendships, that's so important, community, that's so important, and I had 20 values on there, and I realized, okay, why are these things important to me? What's at the core of it? And by narrowing it down and saying why, what I got to at the heart of it was connection. That was what was the core value for me, is being connected to others. So ask yourself when you're circling them, why? And that will help you narrow it down. The other thing you can do, super practical tip, is take, like, say you have it down to 10, ask yourself, if I only could pick one, which one would I pick? Circle that, put that at the top of the list, take the remaining nine. If I only could pick one, which one would I pick? And continue to do that. And that will help you to prioritize and be able to have those top values that really drive your life and your behavior surface. So take time to know your values. It's an exercise that is so, so worth going through. The other thing that I want to take you through in this first step of discovering more about who you are is your experiences and really helping you to dig into your life experiences. So we all obviously go through experiences in our life. And like I mentioned, we just sometimes power through it. So we could go through a success and be like, oh, that was awesome. And then we're on to the next mountain that we're climbing, right? Or we could go through a really challenging situation. Maybe it's a challenging personal situation or a challenging professional situation. And we power through it and we're like, oh, thank goodness that's done. And we move on. And often we don't pause and say, how did that change me? How did that shape me? How did that equip me? Because we're all going through different experiences. And even if you and I go through the same experience, we're going to go through it different ways because we're different people. And so it's so important to just take that time, pause, and think about how have your experiences impacted you, because we can then take those things and apply that to serve others in our life and to have a positive impact. So I'm going to share with you a couple of personal stories to give you an idea of how this can work for you. Um, so on the top of this slide is the logo for Courage Worldwide. So Courage Worldwide is a nonprofit that rescues girls out of sex trafficking, and I was the director of communications for this organization for a few years. Back when I lived back in California, I'm in the Boise area now. And I'm going to tell you in a few minutes how I got involved in that organization because it's going to connect to something else we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But that experience of working at that nonprofit and being part of that effort to fight trafficking changed my life in more ways than I could even explain. And going through that experience really fueled the fire that I felt to help women and younger women and girls really find their voice and to recognize their worth and to know their value. And so that experience really uniquely equipped me for my coaching practice that I started years later when I moved to the Idaho area. And so when we take a look at our experiences, there are things that we go through that we can really draw from and really that can help inform our next steps. And so there's value in reflecting and identifying what those experiences might be. The other picture on there is just it's a stock photo of women walking and talking. And the reason I have that up there is because sometimes we think we have to go through this big epiphany type of experience or have like be a big experience for it to uniquely equip us and prepare us to add value in something else in the future. And maybe you look at, oh, well, I've never worked for a nonprofit that rescues girls out of sex trafficking. Um, and the reason I shared this next example is because it doesn't have to be something that we might think is big in that way. It could be a small experience that really helps to shape our next steps and really helps to equip us personally for something that we might be doing, we might want to do. And so for this example, when I first moved, so I mentioned my husband works at HP, and his job at HP is actually what transferred us from California to the Boise area. And at the time when we moved, so we were born and raised in California, and friends and family there, never had moving out of state on our radar. Um, and we love Boise and we love Idaho. So we're so glad we did. But at the time, it was just this big, kind of scary thing. Well, not kind of, it was scary. So our daughter was a sophomore in high school. Our son was going into his eighth grade. So just a lot. So it was a difficult time to think about uprooting and moving and to a place where we didn't really know anybody. So I remember we moved here, and Mike had to immediately travel for work after we had gotten here. And I was in our front office, and our front office looks out at our street. And I remember seeing these women walk by. It was a group of four women, and they were walking by, fast walking, and they were laughing and they were talking. And oh my goodness, I get choked up thinking about it because I saw them walk by the window and I just started bawling because I was like, I need friends. I need community. I am so lonely. And I just had this like deep, deep ache for community. And the reason I share that is a little while later, I ended up meeting these two women in my community, and we had this shared passion for helping women, and the seed of just like realizing how lonely it can sometimes be and how we need each other and we need community. We were talking. We said, you know what? Let's just create an event where we can get women together and gather in a safe place. Women from all different walks in life, all different walks of life, all different ages, Anyway, we ended up thinking maybe 30 women would come at our first little event, and we had like over 100, I think it was like 120 women, and we thought, oh my goodness, there is this need for this. All of that to say, and the reason I'm sharing this is we ended up co-founding an organization called Lift, which stands for Live Inspired, Fearless, and Thriving, to help women come together in community. And I've since passed the baton on to one of my co-founders, but I share that to say here was this little experience that happened in my personal life that really did something in me and informed some of my next steps. So I encourage you to think about, what are the experiences that you have had in your life that can propel you forward? And think about your two action steps here. Again, you can take a screenshot. This is something you can do, maybe over the weekend or when you have some quiet time. I encourage you to identify and write down three experiences. Obviously, we've all been through more than three experiences, but identify and write down three experiences that have shaped you, and then explore how did they uniquely equip you or change you. And I think what you'll see when you go through this exercise, and I've seen this time and time again in my coaching practice, is you'll have some of those moments where you'll realize, gosh, I didn't realize that impacted me that way. And here's what I can do with that. So I encourage you, make sure you do your values, and really dig into your experiences, and then continue what I call building your personal brand toolbox. And this is where if you haven't done a strengths assessment, do a strengths assessment. If you haven't spent some time really thinking about your passions, take some time digging into your passions, testing and trying out some new things, and then really get clear on your skills. So why does this all matter so much? Because really knowing yourself is what empowers you to impact others. I think we all have this longing to really make an impact in the world, maybe even especially now. I know so many of us have been taking stock. I've talked to so many women, really just taking stock of life and, what do we want to do like with our days left, like that exercise. And so when you're really clear on who you are and the unique value that you bring to all you do, it becomes clear on the action that you can take. So I mentioned Courage Worldwide. And when I first got involved with the organization, how that happened was part of my professional journey has been as a writer. And so there was a time back when mom blogging was a thing. I was a mom blogger and I wrote for parenting magazines and ended up writing a parenting book and all of that. But when I was actively writing for parenting magazines, I had an editor of a local parenting magazine contact me and she said, hey, we're doing a feature article on this local woman and she's founded an organization that rescues girls out of trafficking. Would you like to write the feature piece? And I said, oh my gosh, I would love to. Well, it turns out I knew of her. I didn't know her personally. So I got to reach out to her, interview her, have coffee with her. And as part of my research, and you'll see why I'm putting that in quotes in a minute, I got invited to a benefit concert for the organization. And so I went to the benefit concert and they had lined up a couple interviews for me. And I got to interview an FBI agent who headed up sting operations that rescued girls out of the San Francisco Bay Area, out of motels. And then I got to interview a mom whose daughter had been abducted and trafficked. And we sat in the back of the benefit concert was at this church, and we sat in the back in one of the nurseries, and we sat in rockers facing each other. And I was trying to take notes for this article, and we were just both, mom to mom crying. And I remember seeing tears drip on my notepad, and it was heartbreaking. And then they sat me in the front row at this benefit concert, and just this beautiful music and this heartbreaking video. And at the end of the night, the founder, Genny, got up on stage and she did this passionate call, I need you to join me in this fight against trafficking. And I felt like I was the only one in the room. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is more than a writing assignment. I need to do something. And so I remember driving home that night and I literally said out loud, I have no idea what I'm signing up for, but I am in. So I reached out to her after the article was done and I said, I have this tug on my heart to get involved. Could we meet for coffee? And so we met for coffee. And I remember saying, I am not a social worker. I am not a counselor. I have never worked with victims of trafficking before, but I am a writer. Do you have any writing needs? And she slammed her hand down on the table and she says, you had me at hello. I have been praying for a writer for 3 years, and you were the first writer that has ever approached me. And so that that was it. I joined the organization as a volunteer writer, doing website copy and brochures and things like that, donor letters. And then that just led one thing to another. And I ended up getting hired on as staff as their director of communications. And I share that story just as a reminder that when you know who you are and you know what you can offer, you more easily see those needs, you're more available to fill those needs, and it really empowers you to help other people. So, first step, and I told you we were going to spend a good amount of time in that. So, and we're good on time. The next step that I want to touch on here is this part of communicate. It's really telling who you are. And I just have some brief tips and tricks that I'd love to share with you to put in your back pocket to hopefully help you and empower you to communicate with more confidence and strength. The key thing that I would love for you to take away from this step two of telling who you are is that every interaction you have is an opportunity to strengthen or weaken your personal brand. So if you think of it like that, every conversation, every email, every social post, every interaction is an opportunity for you to strengthen your brand and be known for what you want to be known for, maximize your personal brand, or weaken your personal brand. So with that, I want to give you, and feel free to take a screenshot if you want, to make this something you can get a refresher on. But the first reminder is that when we're talking about communication is to remember that you don't have to say it to actually say it. So 7% of our messages are communicated through our words. Everything else is nonverbal. So it's tone, it's eye contact, it's posture, it's hand gestures. And in fact, our hand gestures, okay, so our brains give 12.5 times more weight to our hand gestures than the words we're saying. And so there's a big difference in me greeting all of you, with my hands folded, and I'm so excited to be with you today, versus I'm so excited to be with you today, right? Because our brains just kind of automatically put more weight on what our hands are doing than the words that we're hearing. In fact, there was a study that was done on TED Talks, and it found that the TED Talks with the most hand gestures were the ones that had gone the most viral, had gotten the most views. So when you're communicating, and this goes for Zoom as well, and I know it is more challenging, very much so in a virtual environment, but even things like eye contact, hand gestures, tone, all of that actually is weighed more in the conversation than the actual words that we're saying. The other thing I want to say, and this is especially true for women, is studies have been found that we tend to say words that weaken our messaging. Words like sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have a question, instead of I have a question. I just want to cover a little something, I actually think versus I think. I already mentioned a little, sort of, and mostly. And I am still the two on here that I still catch myself, and I might have even done this in this presentation time with you. Sorry and just. There are times where I will be replying in an email, sorry, and I think, do I really need to say sorry? And so it's just a matter of catching yourself. And this isn't to beat yourself up. It's a process. Like I said, I'm still working on this, but just being aware that there are words that we tend to use that can weaken our messaging, and being able to catch ourselves and try to eliminate those words from our communication. The last thing is a note on strengthening your emails. This is an interesting one. With our virtual work environments, emails are more important now. I don't know that I should say than they've ever been, but email is extremely important. And a study was just done. So this is kind of a little tip or trick you can test out. A study was just done by a company, Boomerang, and they looked at the closings of 350,000 email threads. And what they found was the emails that ended with some form of thank you, whether it's thanks so much or thanks or thank you, they got a much higher response rate than emails that didn't. And what they found was the reason behind that was because people felt like when someone was saying thanks, even if it was a thanks so much or thanks, have a great day, they felt acknowledged as a human being. They felt seen and they felt heard. And so maybe instead of ending emails with, best regards, which I think we so often tend to do, or sincerely, try testing it out with a thanks or a thank you or a thanks so much. Um, and see if that improves email communication. So again, with our virtual environment, it's just email is so important right now. So that's three tips and tricks to hopefully help you communicate with more strength and confidence. But I also want to share this resource. Again, you can take a screenshot of this. One of my favorite books, Vanessa Van Edwards, Captivate: The Science of Succeeding with People. And she is just amazing. I can't even tell you so many things on how to communicate and connect and interact with people effectively. So this is a great resource that I highly recommend. And I would follow her on LinkedIn too. She's got a ton of videos. She does a lot of sharing on LinkedIn, and she's just really good at what she does. Okay, time check. We are good. Okay, I want to end this second step with I feel like I can't talk about communicating without really reminding all of us, myself included, what we say about ourselves and what we say to others about ourselves is important too. So, not just focusing on how we communicate to other people, but really what we're telling ourselves. And I have a gardener outside, so I am so sorry for the background noise. This wasn't planned. Go figure. Anyway, so I want to share with you. I already told you part of my professional journey was writing. Well, when I first started out as a writer, I was a closet writer. I did not tell anyone because I thought I had to have my writing perfected. I thought I had to be published in order to say I'm a writer. And so for the longest time, I just wrote in secret. Only my husband Mike really knew. And I studied the market, and I would go check out as many books as I could at the library. I started out writing children's books, and I was writing my manuscripts and sending them out to publishers and getting rejections. And I wasn't telling others what I was doing. And I wasn't thinking of myself as a writer. I wasn't calling myself a writer either. And then someone wiser than me said, Jenny, you don't have to be published to call yourself a writer. You're writing. So you are a writer. And that gave me courage to start telling people what I was doing. And I started taking myself more seriously. I started calling myself a writer. I started telling other people I was writing, and they started taking me more seriously. I started going to writing conferences, and I joined a writing critique group and all of that. And doors started to open for me. So I really just encourage you, when we're thinking about telling who you are, it's not just communicating with others, it's what are you telling yourself? And then how are you talking about yourself to other people? And just making sure it's not with words that can hold you back. Super important. Okay, we are on our last step, and then we are going to wrap and open it up for some Q&A, probably 10 minutes of Q&A. Um, this is give who you are. And I've already mentioned people with strong personal brands, they know it's not about them. So having a strong personal brand is not about you or puffing yourself up. It's really about knowing the unique value you bring to the table and having that clarity on how you can then use that to have an impact in the lives of others. The good news is, and I know I've thrown a lot at you in our short amount of time together, is it's easier than you think. I love this quote from Jeff Goins. He's a well-known author, blogger, and speaker. He says, stop talking about how awesome you are, how cool your thing is, how great your life is, and just get to work. Help people whenever you can, as often as you can. And if you do this, you won't have to worry about self-promotion. Other people will do the talking for you. And I just love that. We don't have to get all hung up on, am I doing everything right? It's really just focusing on helping people as often as we can, whenever we can. Maya Angelou said that there are 4 questions we all walk around asking in our mind, even if we're not aware of them. And those questions are, do you see me? Do you care that I'm here? Am I enough for you? And can I tell I'm special by the way you look at me? And the reason I share this is because when we start thinking about how we can add value in the lives of others, if we think about the fact that possibly all of us as humans are walking around with these questions in our mind. You think about the people on your team at work. You think about the people in your family. You think about your neighborhood. You think about your community. And think about if everybody is wondering these things, how do they feel when they're interacting with you? How are they walking away from a conversation with you? And are you giving of who you are, whether that's in a professional capacity or whether that's in a personal capacity? And I want to share a story that I think really, I'm going to wrap with the story that really illustrates, I think, really well, people giving of who they are. So this is a true story. This happened in Springfield, Missouri, around noon one day in November back in 2017. And in their town square, a man was seen standing on the roof. And so, of course, people started to gather, a roof of a building in a town square. People started to gather below. Somebody called the police. The police came and tried to coax the man down, and he wouldn't come down. The fire truck came. They lifted a ladder up to the roof, and the man wouldn't get on the ladder. And of course, more and more people started to, gather in the town square below. And for hours, that man stood on that roof and wouldn't come down. And so, as time passed, the sun went down, it started to get dark, it started to get windy, it started to get cold. There were pictures seen of him crouched down on the edge of the roof, pulling his shirt over his legs to stay warmer. And he still wouldn't come down. But just before 9 o'clock that night, something happened. And about a dozen people in the town square below began making and holding up signs with messages for this man. And you can see from the picture signs like, it's okay, you're valuable. In the article that I read about this, a girl named Timber said she was on her way to a concert when she walked by the square and she saw the man on the ledge, and she was quoted as saying, I didn't have the heart to leave the guy. And so she didn't go to the concert. She stayed, and her sign was the one that said, you're not alone. And there was another girl named Amanda who was quoted, and she said she saw somebody post a picture of this man standing on the roof on social media. And so she came down and decided she wanted to try to help. And so she participated in making and holding up signs. And after 15 hours of standing on that roof contemplating suicide, the man finally came down. And his life was saved largely because of people who stopped and took time to give of who they are. And we have opportunities all around us, not only in our work, but in our communities and in our world, where we can take who we uniquely are and make an impact in the life of someone else. And this, I think this is a beautiful piece of doing that as well, is that Carla Schumann, she's an expert in emotional intelligence, and she's done studies, and she shares that being supportive and compassionate to others has a positive impact on our own emotional adjustment. When we feel needed and believe that we can help others, we also become stronger and more resilient. And so we become more resilient leaders, more resilient parents, more resilient friends, stronger friends. And so it's kind of like that compounding ripple effect that we talked about in the very beginning. Any type of transformation that we want to see in the world, that really starts with us. And when we get clear on who we are and the value we can add, we more readily and easily see the opportunities around us. We more readily and easily can step into those opportunities to take action. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with, because I do not want you to walk away from this feeling overwhelmed, like there's just too many things to do and too many action steps, is just the reminder. And I always share this with the women that I work with, is that small steps are a big deal. When I work with coaching clients, we set goals, but we always break it down into smaller action steps. And so I really just encourage you to remember, every action that you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. That's from James Clear, amazing book, Atomic Habits. But small steps are a big deal. So maybe take time to just soak in some of the notes you might have taken today. You can always come back and watch this session, but really leave this time just thinking about, what is your next small step? Maybe that's just going through the values exercise. Maybe that's taking a strengths assessment because you've never done that. Maybe it's reading Vanessa Van Edwards' book, Captivate, great book. So just just think about what your next small step is, and just remember that every action is a vote for the type of person you want to become and moving and propelling you forward. And with that, I want to invite you to connect. I would love to hear what your next step is. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to connect with me in LinkedIn. Here's my contact information. There's my website, and then Stoltz as well. And I will turn it over to you, Cassie, for any questions that might have come through.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a great presentation. And on behalf of everyone here, I just want to say thank you for being here today and sharing your wisdom and giving us some inspiration.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We're going to go ahead and start off with a question. She says, people talk about having passions. To me, that is something that you really love. The things I love don't translate to work. That happens to all of us. How important is being passionate about the job you have or want to have?
Oh, such a great question. It's a question I get a lot. So it's so common. And I think so many feel that way. And I really want to encourage you, if that's you and you do feel that way, just know that you, oh gosh, there's so many things I want to say. I gotta reel it in. Maybe I should share a story, an example of somebody I worked with in the past. This might show how we can take things that we're passionate about, even if our job is totally different and the things we're doing in our work aren't tapping into what we feel like our passions are. There are still things that we might be able to do, small steps to bring some of that passion into our work. So I worked with a woman one time who was feeling as if she was withering in her job, was not passionate about her work, very creative soul, wasn't doing anything creative in her day-to-day 9 to 5. Once we unearthed some of the things that she loved to do creatively, what she realized is she could raise her hand and volunteer for some creative activities at work. And so even if it was something as small as volunteering to create the PowerPoint design for the staff meeting and things like that, she was able to bring in these tiny pieces of things that she was passionate about in her work. So it wasn't necessarily her role changed. She didn't, and she actually couldn't get a new job due to financial reasons, but she was able to, once she got clear on the fact that I really am a creative person and I do all these DIY things in my personal life, but it doesn't overlap at all in my career. But once she was able to identify what are some creative things I can do in my career, it actually did lighten that feeling that she had had previously of feeling like I'm withering in this job. So I hope that answers it with an illustration.
I think that was a great example. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So what is your advice for young women who are still trying to figure out who they are and where they want to go? This is everyone, whether you're young or not, to be honest.
Yes.
Since graduating college, I notice many of my peers also feel lost trying to navigate this.
Yeah. Great question. You are not alone. And I would say just simply start taking small steps in that very first step that I told you, discovering more about who you are. Even if you've never done a strengths assessment, do a strengths assessment. If you've never done the values exercise, start thinking about, what are the things that you hold dear in your life? What are your priorities? What are your values? And start chipping away at that, because the more you get to know yourself, the more what I've seen in my work with women and in my own life is the more we dig in and say, okay, how am I uniquely gifted? What are my natural talents? What are my strengths? What are my values? Things like that. It can inform the next step of what we might want to do. But what I also want to say is, it isn't a once and done, like what you just said, Cassie. It's oftentimes testing and exploring. My own career path has been so varied over the years. I mentioned I worked at Hewlett Packard, I've worked at a nonprofit, I've done speaking, I've done blogging. There's so many different things. And each experience builds on the other experience. So don't feel like you have to have it figured out or have to arrive. A lot of it is just testing and seeing, saying yes to that next thing, testing it out. Is it a fit for you? Is it not a fit for you? How does that experience shape you and equip you? And what might you be able to do that for your next decision? So sometimes career paths, and what I find in my work with women is most often our paths in lives are not like this. They're varied and they have twists and they have turns, and that is okay. And so it's not necessarily having it figured out. It's more going along the journey. But I would say the very starting point. So I've worked with a lot of women later in life who say, I can't do this anymore, and have never gone through the process of who am I? What do I even like? What are my strengths? What am I good at? So starting there, especially as a young woman, is so valuable and so important. And then that can inform your next step.
I personally have a question to kind of add on to that. How do you have the energy to continue seeking growth when your path is kind of meandering?
Yeah. Well, I think the very first thing is give yourself grace and compassion, especially in today's world where we're navigating so many different challenging things. And as much as we might want to power through and say it doesn't affect me, I think it just affects each and every one of us, and obviously in different ways. So I start with like that place of give yourself grace, give yourself compassion, and then just basics too. Community is so important. I find that when I'm in that place, if I get to that place of either I've got too much going on or I'm too stressed or if I'm questioning a decision or anything like that, it's those times when I'm talking with others, processing with others, and realizing that I am not alone. I think that is so important to fuel and invigorate us toward our next step. There's just something about hearing, oh gosh, I was feeling that way too, or I remember when I went through that too, or I'm in the same spot right now. So there's that community piece that I think that's absolutely and foundational. And I think what makes it so challenging right now is um we're just navigating a lot of isolation just by nature of what everything that's happening in the world. And so I think if I could just encourage everyone, if we think about that one next step, what is one step we can all take toward community? Maybe it's just a Zoom call with a friend or a coffee date with a friend, or maybe it's getting a circle of women together and like having regular discussions once a month to check in or do a book club or something like that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And Cassie, thank you for facilitating. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. All right.
Okay.
Have a good one.